Good morning. Welcome back to Daybreak, the show that brings you what you need to think about as we begin the day. My name is Sam Gituku.
And my name is Zinzi Kibiku. Thank you so much for joining us. We're about to jump straight into press review. Remember, again, we welcome your feedback and your comments on the discussions we'll be having. Tweet us at Citizen TV Kenya, as well as Zinzi_K.
And at Sam Gituku. And of course, we want to now introduce our panelists here. Senator Ledama Ole Kina from Narok. Karibu sana. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Honorable Dr. Chris Omalwa from Kiminindi constituency. Karibu sana. You've been away.
Yes, I've been away and I'm back.
Okay, great to see you. And Senator Moses Kajong from Homa Bay County. How is the county?
It's doing well. It's
now,
doing well.
After the Supreme Court petition, everything is back to normal?
Yeah, now we are poised for takeoff. What we want to do is to organize a leaders meeting so that we agree on how to proceed.
Okay.
But I believe that having put the politics behind us and the litigation, we have no other excuse that would stop us from delivering.
Not to deliver services.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for making time for us. And we now want to take a look at what's making headlines. On the front page of the Daily Nation, you'll see that at the very top, National Irrigation Board in the soup over 200 billion shilling dam tender. On paper, tendering for the High Grand Falls Dam met all the procurement regulations, but on closer scrutiny, the Public Procurement Administrative Review Board found glaring irregularities and fined NIB 250,000. A whistleblower says there are vested interest in the huge project. How far the wheeler dealers willing to go? That's a story that is focused on page 4 of the Daily Nation. We'll be looking at that.
If you're a parent, one story that will catch your eyes on page 2 and 3, schools have become the new playground for drug lords. That specific story is questions, or rather shows how children are on drugs. The shocking revelation. This personally reminds me of that video that went viral last week. Sam, did you see it? Where a little boy was smoking marijuana and he looked like he's been doing it for a while now. He was doing it so professionally.
It's so unfortunate he's being guided by 2 adults.
Then that's the thing, right?
Male
so
adults.
You might want to grab a copy of the Daily Nation as a parent and make sure that you take a look at that specific story, page 2 and page 3.
And of course, matters education still on the front page of the Daily Nation. Ministry stops laptop project. They will now build computer labs, and that story is given coverage on the paper. You laugh, Senator? Why do you laugh?
Because we said it from the beginning. It was a completely misguided approach to helping build the technology in our schools. We said, do away with laptops, set up computer labs. We said that. And all of a sudden, it's coming back to what we said.
All right.
It don't make sense.
So, all right, we'll look at that and see whether there's any wisdom in forming that decision. On the front page of the Standard.
Right. MPs fight banks on daily cash limit rule. This is what we had teased earlier on. A few members of parliament are saying, listen, according to CBK, if I have to transfer about 10,000 US dollars, which is 1 million Kenyan shillings, why do I have to go through such a paper routine? We'll give you the details in just a few, but also on page 10, Sam.
Oh, you want me to look at page 10?
Yes, that's one of the stories that we'll be taking a look at. The handcuff story that Ndavadi had.
Okay, that is Ruto to consider naming a female running mate for 2022, obviously.
Do you think that's possible? Do you think that Kenya will see a female president soon?
My opinion doesn't count. But anyway, let me just take you back to the front page of the Standard that you see Mudavadi handcuffs, not handshake policy. ANC leader argues that Uhuru Raila political truce has slowed down fight against corruption and urges president to press for prosecution of top officials implicated in graft. That's a story that we'll be paying attention to, including Mwiraria's final herbal wish, rare will. In secret written death wish, former finance minister who died of cancer decrees that his children must set aside 50 acres for planting of indigenous trees with medicinal value for sale. What's in a will? Shall we start there?
All right.
So, what's in a will?
It's an expression of the wishes of somebody, and I think that what Mwiraria has done, I've just read the headline, is a very good sign. It also encourages us, because a lot of young people, especially when they're left with land, they end up subdividing the land and selling it to investors who then set up gated estates or things like that. And for Mwiraria to tell the children that set aside this number of acres for purposes of medicine or for purposes of planting, growing herbs and trees for medicinal value.
Right.
That means that even the children will be left with something that protects the environment, but also can help others who are in certain life-threatening situations.
Okay.
I know one of the children of the late Mwiraria is a gentleman I was in school with. He's a very well-grounded gentleman, very well educated, but very well-grounded, and I do believe that this will is going to be executed. And it's good. We must encourage people to plant trees, and we must also discourage this subdivision of land. You find a man dies and he's got 1 acre and 4 children, and once the will is executed, that 1 acre is converted into 4 quarter-acre plots, and it goes on and on and on. We've gotten to a level where even in the rural economies, I was in Homa Bay County just the other day, and the rains have started. Right. And the problem that people have is that the farms have become so small in size that even doing useful large-scale farming becomes impossible. We are trying to do sorghum because of East Africa breweries who have set up a plant in Kisumu now. But the farms are so small that when farmers grow, birds come in and eat up everything. It's quite an interesting case because the sorghum variety that we have been given in that area is sweet. It has got a high sugar content, and birds love it. And the reason why we can't make a lot of money out of it is because of the small sizes. Right. And so they're telling us to consolidate. But land has been so subdivided that it is very difficult to find an area which is 10 acres where farmers can consolidate. So this is a good sign. It is a good message to the young people. And I do believe and I do hope that the children are going to execute.
What's the difference between a will and a trust?
Well, a trust would be you set up a legal instrument where maybe you put your assets or you put everything, and then you'll have trustees who will manage it on your behalf. A lot of that is being done by these billionaires. You see, the guys who've made billions, particularly after the dot-com era, they would establish trusts which then would manage their assets and wealth in perpetuity in certain defined or prescribed areas. A will then could lead to creation of a trust. Because in the will is where you express how you want your assets to be utilized. You can establish a trust, or you can just decide that let everyone divide the money, or like in the case of the guy of Chanel, he decided to leave his wealth to his cat.
Yeah. Right, and gentlemen, Mheshimiwa Ledama Ole Kina and Mheshimiwa Chris Omalwa, quite a number of people die intestate without expressing their wishes in a will. Is it a necessity now, bearing in mind the situations that you experience socially?
A will is something very important, and when you look at the genesis of a will, in traditional days, people were sharing property based on the customary laws. But as days change, you realize that that trust among families wasn't there, particularly when people come from a polygamist family. You know, there's always that scramble for the partition of the estate. And most of the time when the offsprings are given the property, they end up messing it up. And that's why we have these emerging cases of having a trust, because a trust is supposed to run the organization day-to-day operations, mostly in commercial enterprises for purposes of profit making. But when it comes to a will you are trying to give a wish on how your property is going to be divided among your siblings or dependents or your family, or for purposes of legacy. For instance, like here, Mwiraria wants the property, some part of the property for purposes of indigenous trees. Maybe he wants his legacy on the indigenous trees, and particularly on the role that indigenous trees play when it comes to their medicinal value. Like now we have a lot of cases of cancer, which is something very expensive. But if we had even the traditional healers coming up to say, like in where I come from, there's a tree called Marobaini, that when you get that concoction, there are chances of mitigating this threat of cancer. Because right now, issues of cancer, they're at a very high risk. People are very vulnerable. With the kind of lifestyle, the type of foods we are taking, you find that cancer is now a big threat. And you are seeing people advocating that cancer should be declared a national disaster. And I think in the National Assembly, we passed a motion. I read somewhere in the papers, people from Embu, they are requesting that the president should declare cancer as a national disaster. And I'm very much aware that in the last National Assembly, we declared cancer as a national disaster. So the government needs to put measures in place, to put budgets in place for purposes of handling or managing cancer. And the big challenge when it comes to managing cancer is about this thing of early diagnosis. Because when you go for late diagnosis, the chances of survival are very difficult. But we've seen cases where people went for early diagnosis. We've seen the governor of Kisumu. We've seen Beth Mugo. They went for early diagnosis, and you can see they're now living healthy.
Senator Ledama, let me rope you in. Demystify for us the myth that perhaps wills and trustees are only for a certain economic class, the upper class. Should middle class and should the lower class also be concerned with writing a will as well? I
think everybody should. The first time I thought about drafting my will, I was only 21 years old. I only had like maybe $600 in my account. I had some properties that I was given back at home, and I wanted, when I'm no longer there, I wanted to make sure that whatever I had, someone took care of it. Sure. Because we always say that we are borrowing this planet from our children. So it's very, very important. I remember very well that in this Kenya, we've had two very, very rich families that have ended up in court. One in mine is in Jenga Karume family. There was another one, Kerima. And I think it's sad because it is imperative that when you're alive, for you to think about yourself when you're gone. So I think, despite the fact that we have this myth in our cultures that when you start, drafting a will or, expressing how your properties or who you're bequeathing your wealth to becomes like sort of like a taboo. It's like you're calling for your death sooner. We have to be realistic that we are only in this world for a very short time. And I'm particularly happy with the issue of the will expressed by the late Mwiraria in terms of the rivers, in terms of indigenous trees. Because the indigenous trees help ensure that there's plenty of rainfalls. If you look at what is happening in the Mau forest, a lot of people are now feeling the pain. And let them feel the pain, because it's their own destruction. Look at, even you look at page 12 of the standard, it talks about the Mau forest. All these indigenous trees, they have a great purpose. My colleagues here have talked about the medicinal values, and I'm happy. In fact, my message to the Mwiraria family is that come to me. I'll make sure at least I give you 1,000 seedlings of the indigenous trees.
Oh, great. Yes. I hope they have heard you.
I hope so too.
They should be looking for Senator Ole Kina.
Maybe something on that. There was a court ruling in Nyeri about the inheritance of land by the daughters. Yes. In some communities, ladies are not supposed to inherit land.
Yes.
But now, the Constitution is supreme, and any customary law that contravenes the Constitution is null and void. And when I was in the village, people asked, and it's true, even if your daughter is married, is gone, she has a right, unless there's a renunciation. Otherwise, all your children have a right to inherit. And that's why the importance of doing a will, putting a will in place, so that in future you avoid the conflicts in the family.
Of course.